All right, it sounds like we are live. Tommy, we're live, correct?
Yep, all good.
Sounds good. Well, welcome to the session at the Scottish Summit. Our session is the myth of a successful Teams rollout. And we are very excited to be part of the Scottish Summit. I hope you guys already saw a lot of great sessions. Of course, an event like this could not be possible without sponsors. So a huge thank you to our sponsors today, to ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proximo 3. We also have Redspire, Agilysys, as well as Hitachi Solutions. Thank you very much. It's always wonderful to see big events like this supported by great companies. Thank you. My name is Antje Lamartine. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager with If Blueprint. I'm saying hello to you from beautiful Munich today. The sun has been shining, and I've been working with the Microsoft platform for about 10 years, and my focus has been adoption and change management.
And I'm joining from Graz, Austria. My name is Thomas Goelles. I'm working for a company called Solvion, and I'm the team lead there for Modern Workplace. So everything around SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365, and also artificial intelligence is something that I'm proud of to work with my colleagues. And yep, sun is still shining over here as well.
That's great. And we are also we're hosting, or we're the producers of a bi-weekly podcast, Adoption and Technik. It is a German podcast. So if you do know anybody German who's curious about anything M365 and looked at it from the two different standpoints of adoption and Technik, feel free to pass our link on here. We would love to have more listeners.
And also from Switzerland and Austria, not only German, just German speaking, but my German friends will learn that.
Eventually. All right, so let's get started. We're going to talk about these different myths of a successful Teams rollout. And the first myth we want to talk about is that it's just another IT project, right? Or is it really? Now, if we think about this idea that it's just another IT project, I mean, the question is, where does this idea come from? And we believe it comes from the fact that in the past, IT had a lot more control, and IT delivered solutions and technology, and the business accepted it, at least most of the time, right? Technology was much simpler, the business was simpler, the processes were simpler. So yeah, I think overall, Tommy, it was a good world, right? It was comfortable.
It was a little bit easier, yeah.
I think so too, but it has changed. And the present now actually, well, when I think about the present world of technology, what always comes to my mind is that sentence, the only constant in life is change. Cloud technologies nowadays really mean constant change. That means also that the business really knows about technology now as well. And they might actually ask for it. They're not those people that are just receiving, but they can inform themselves. And they do know that there's a lot of room for customizations. It's also a new way of working together. I don't know if you remember when Teams was rolled out in 2017, Microsoft had this one slide that said, it's a new way of working together. And when I saw that slide initially, I was thinking to myself, yeah, right, marketing department at work, nice, really nice line. But then as I started working with teams, I realized that it was absolutely true. It is a new way of working together, and it really impacts everyone. So what could be that approach to get away from thinking that it really is just another IT project? Well, first of all, it's important to involve the business, because IT decisions have to be made, right? What do you turn on? What do you deactivate? What do you allow? And if you do understand what the business needs, then you're going to be able to actually make these decisions based on the needs of the business. And when you go about starting to work together and collaborate with the business, one of the things that I've always found is really, really important is that you don't need to engage just one department, but there are really many different departments that should have a say in it and should at least have the chance to actually give their input, from HR to internal communications, marketing to training. And it's also important to just remember that to communicate consistently throughout a rollout, such as Teams, is hugely important. And I can only give you this advice: plan plan your communication ahead of time and stay on top of it, because I've often seen in project that communication is really not as easy as everybody thinks it to be, because you have to think about the messages you're giving. And so planning it ahead of time is great. Building a community, yep, always a big thing, because did I say that change is constant? So staying on top of it is really hard. If you are building a community, then people are going to be able to help each other. And even if you don't know, if we don't know what the next step is, or if we are not sure about something, we can pull on our network to work together. So what do you think about the myth, Thomy? Is it just another IT project?
Of course not. I think, and that's, you see already the idea of the slide deck, myth busted. It's about the people, not the technology, of course.
Most definitely.
Okay, my time to take away with the next one. Another myth that, actually comes, I think, from the ancient SharePoint times. It's just another file share, right? You used to live in a world where everything is local. Almost everyone had internal access. If we wanted to be or were forced to be like something in a home office situation, we are now today every day basically. We used VPNs. I said we used because I'm in the home office no more than a year, and I don't have a VPN connection actually. So if everything in the cloud is a little bit different, we or our customers, and I say we because we had that same situation. We felt that we have everything structured and everything is perfect in our folder templates and file shares, and then you go down 17, 20. I think that the most I ever saw was 27 levels deep of file share structures, and CEO saying that, okay, we know everything in our file shares and we will find that immediately. Which is true. If you work with that file share for 5 or 6 years, then you know your way around. There's no question. It's like the library on the right-hand side. If you go there regularly, if you know your stuff, it's very easy to find. But if you don't know the library, there is still something like a title or an inventory or an area of focus in one of those shelves. So there is metadata into libraries as well, also in books. So that's why SharePoint document libraries has metadata and titles, because basically it's the digital representation of something we all are used to use in the physical world. And then we have the My Drive. Mostly it was a drive with, let's say, 50 or 100 megs of space, named with one of the letters of the company, a K drive, L drive, M drive. I think I've seen all 26 possibilities there. And it's now one drive. Why is that the case? One click too soon. It's not only marketing, but we are working in way more teams than we are used to. I think there is one Gartner study saying that we work now with 5 different generations in the workplace. I'm not 100% sure I'm working with 5 different generations. I think 2 or 3 already cuts it, and 2 or 3 already is a lot to deal with. We work from everywhere. Just look at the conference. I'm standing here in my office in Graz in Austria. Antje streams live from Munich. You are listening most probably somewhere in Scotland or all over the world, actually, if you watch that later on YouTube. So we work from everywhere. And we have guests and external users as well. So it's not only us internals at the company. So security is a totally different game now. Everyone uses multiple devices. We all have to have those smartphones, laptops, desktops, tablets. So that's a given. And cloud storage is also here to stay. So we not really rely on a physical server that we own or on a drive that we own. And all those devices and all those different types of access, of course, would need a different governance tool as well, and a different mindset of how we can go for governance in that case. Brings us to the approach. Important sentence. Don't punish the people for their learning. It makes no sense to talk with end users about features they have no idea what they can do with if they don't know the technology already. So it doesn't help if you ask them, should you use this feature or that feature, if you don't get the sense behind or the added value. So that makes no sense, and it makes even less sense if you think you know it better. That's not also working. You need to explain what value you add, and instead of listening all the features, it's about the value that you add. Provide a pitch. What we mean by that is that those projects work best if we add what Antje was saying, if we align our communication. So think of an elevator pitch that all your project members should be ready to give at any case in elevator at lunchtime. In a regular environment, maybe online is a little bit different, but to get the idea spread, keep the rules simple, and think of a document lifecycle before you start storing documents in there. I always say at customers, before we store a document, we need to define how it gets out or into the archive first. So don't start and start in a way that you say, okay, let's do that later on. Just tackle the problem right at the beginning, and then it's maybe for my personal life, it's really a rare situation, but there are those edge cases, those use cases where offline plays a big part. So you need to train the people to synchronize the documents with OneDrive, to take things offline, to make sure they understand what works in an always-on environment and what doesn't really work, so they are not surprised by situations, or even worse, embarrassed in certain use cases where they are forced in an offline situation and they need to learn how to handle it at first hand. They should prepare for that, and they should get trained for that. Our myth, of course, is also busted here, and think of way beyond than just a file share, with everything in teamwork and with communication also added, to really get the return of invest you are striving for.
What else did we bring? So the next myth that I've been hearing in projects many times is, with a team's rollout, training people is really overrated. I mean, they can figure it out on their own. Really, it's so easy to use. And of course, we've been wondering where this assumption is really coming from. And when we look at training in the past, it was classroom training. There were user guides produced, which, by the way, is still happening today. And it's not something I like, but it's okay, right? Because it depends on the users. But in the past, it was also very common that courses were really assigned. I mean, you could roll something new up, and then IT said, well, here's something that we should tell people. Someone in the company, maybe in a training department, created the content. And it was very rare that users actually said, oh, I want to learn about it, but they really had to force into learning it by having the courses assigned. But then when it comes to training, we also had less remote work. People were sitting in the same offices, so you were able to learn from each other. But there were also less changes and feature updates. And when I think about the less changes, what comes to my mind is the 3-year release cycle, SharePoint on-prem. I mean, we always had the option to say, yep, we want to go to the next version or not. And that, of course, also meant that we had an influence on training people or not. But how does it actually look like today, training? I mean, the present really looks different. The feature updates are constant. I mean, just a few months ago, we had the breakout rooms come out in Teams. Overnight, all of a sudden they were there. The other day, the emojis just came up in the team meetings, and just yesterday or 2 days ago, I noticed as I was switching tenants and teams that it looks different. Now, we also have in the training world, we have new delivery formats, right? I mean, in the olden days, it was maybe some basic learning management systems, but nowadays you can actually buy great third-party products, apps on your phone, you can use gamification. There's YouTube, the internet, right? You can learn a lot there as well. And that now enables the end users also really to become more self-sufficient. Also, there's again this generational change. Thomy just mentioned it, how many generations we have now in the workplace. And generally speaking, people are more tech savvy. But I've noticed often that just because they're tech savvy in their private life, right? And we're talking again about our cell phones. I mean, we have apps on them and we use them without a problem. Anytime there comes an update, we'll just go with the flow. It doesn't usually translate into the business place. I've noticed that. So we also brought an approach for that to actually think about this myth. And the approach really is that when you start thinking about training the end users, start with an analysis and figure out what training has been done so far, and ask this very important question: what worked and what didn't work. And I don't mean about just having a conversation about it, but ideally do it in a workshop, maybe 3-4 hours, give people the chance to think about it on their own instead of just one person after the other saying this worked, this didn't work. And when you do this, it's very, very important to also understand how your team members learn, because if you've been training your end users for a long time, their needs change. I mean, their outlook on training might change as well. So you're going to recognize that one size doesn't fit all, but if you have a good sense what worked so far and what the needs are in the future, of course, you can then update your training. Or you might have training that just works perfectly, so then don't change it. But also training these days really also means building community. I mean, you could do this through lunch and learns, make it optional for the end users, so have a choice. They have a choice if they want to come or not. And I think at the end of the day, it's also really becoming of really helping each other and figuring out how to help yourself, either through resources that you actually deliver in within your company, or also by really also pointing to all the wonderful Microsoft documentation. And there's plenty out there. And when I think about this, the one documentation or the link that comes to my mind is the Adoption Hub, the adoption.microsoft.com. There's plenty to learn about it. Now, also don't forget to provide a mechanism for feedback, because your end users will maybe get used to the new way of learning. So make sure that they have a chance to tell you what works for them and what doesn't work for them, so you can adjust along the way, and be sure that if, as you might have changes within your company by other people coming into the company, new hires, or maybe also by having a slight cultural change, that you can adjust for that. So I think at the end of the day, when I think about the myth, training is overrated. No, it's not overrated, but I would really change that word training, or this idea of providing information, into really enabling the end users, and most importantly, to meet them where they are, not to meet them where we think they are.
Yeah, and to add an interesting angle to that question as well, if you think of the one of the latest, greatest announcements coming out of Redmond, Viva, there is Viva Learning, right? So
Yep.
we're not the only ones that think that learning, training, enabling, empowerment is important. Microsoft actually creates a whole solution around it and integrates with the big learning providers, learning platform providers. And don't want to go into names because I most probably forget someone, but you know who you are. And the idea is basically with Viva Learning that you're not leaving your digital workplace or your modern workplace to gather new information or to learn something new. It will be an integral part of your environment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Going on with one of the classics, yeah, I think it's not only a Teams myth, it's probably a consultancy myth, right? It's just copying what company XYZ does. So we are all the same, and I'm speaking now as a potential customer. We are in the same industry. We're in the same business. We use the same software, same approaches. So why isn't there a way of getting you, so me, to do the project in a more streamlined way, in a most probably of the time that just means I want it a little bit cheaper and a little bit faster, because you already did that 20 times, 50 times, 100 times. And that was true to a certain degree if you think of certain industries or verticals, how Microsoft calls it, because there are same needs. But again, yeah, the business has changed as well. So we have companies that basically are here and weren't in the game, let's say 15 years ago. Just take, for example, the car manufacturing industry. Tesla is, I think, still a pretty young compared to all the Volkswagen, Ford, BMW, Audi, whatsoever, and they are, yeah, surfing the wave quite nicely at the moment, I think. So there are new approaches. There are new companies maybe in your business and with the same goal, but they have a different path to it, and the different workforce and the diverse workforce. So that changes as well. With everything being remotely, we also have a diverse infrastructure. It's not as we techies would like it, a clean and easy infrastructure and we know every piece of it. It's more diverse in the infrastructure as well. And of course, spanning globally, we are dealing with different cultures. And that's a good thing because it fosters our ideas and we are more creative with all the different backgrounds. But we need to make a little bit of a sense in our projects. And that's why there is the Kinevin framework. Something I think I can say that I'll quote me on that. I learned to love back in 2012 in Birmingham, actually. Old SharePoint MVP Andrew Woodward from Birmingham did a SharePoint governance workshop back then, and I was lucky enough to get a ticket. And there was a guy there talking about the Kinevin framework. And Kinevin, I'm not here to talk to you about Welsh pronunciation, but I think Kinevin is how you pronounce it correctly. The idea of the Kinevin framework is that we have 4 different states of our problems or projects. One is simple. So that's the easy one where you just see a problem, you sense it, you categorize it, and you respond to it. That's the easiest way, but it gets way more complicated pretty easy. And then we have 2 on the top of it, complicated and complex. And please don't make the assumption that a complicated problem is easier than a complex one. It's just different. A complicated problem, for example, can be an Exchange migration from one version to another, or just a SharePoint migration from one version to another. It can be highly complicated, but you can sense what it needs to be done, and then you analyze, then you respond, because you know all the outcomes. There's a certain input. If you parse this input, you know how to respond and you know how to do it. You've done it 20 times. It's easy for you, but it's still a highly complicated task that needs a highly educated skill set. On the other side, we have a complex problem. And the complex problem gets complex because we add people to it and we change maybe behaviors. We change how we work together. That's everything we do with teams. You basically, by introducing teams, most of the time we are changing how people work together and how they work during their 8 hours, 9 to 5 at their workplace. We change the way how they communicate. We take away maybe conversations from the phone, move them to chat. We make them transparent in the channel conversation. We make them use a Teams document library, so transparency also at the document level. That's a huge impact. And you cannot answer those problems in a certain way. Of course, as a consultant, you have a skill set and you can apply your skill set to that, but it's not a copy from another company. So it's really something that where you probe something, then you sense, and then you respond. That's where everything agile, design thinking, all those buzzwords are in the complex area, because you cannot just copy what you did at another customer. It can be a good first step or it can be a good direction, but no copy and pasting there. And of course, there is chaos as in every project, but we want to get out of the chaos as soon as possible. And then there's something very interesting. That's this crisis phase on the right-hand side. Sometimes this graph is also like an island and you roll off of a cliff, because if you are overconfident, you think something is simple, but in reality, it isn't. It's probably most of the time in our world something between complex and complicated. And I only can encourage you to check out the YouTube link down here to watch. I think it's 8 or 9 minutes where the guy that invented the framework explains it probably way better than I can do, but it really, really changed my view of things around SharePoint. And again, it also helps with cloud. So complex problems, there's a lot of people involvement and we change the way people work together. That's why we can't just act like it's a software update. That means, of course, myth is busted, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you really you gotta lead the project with a diverse group of people for the best outcome. This comes back down to the fact that I think, wasn't it the first myth? It's more than an IT project. Somehow it all is interconnected, right?
Yep. Systems interactions. Yeah.
What can I say? Well, but we brought another myth, and I really don't know which one of all these myths is my favorite one, but when we actually worked on these slides and we said, well, our users will love all these new features, yeah, that's kind of an interesting one, and I had fun putting this together. So how did it look like in the past? I mean, did our users really love all the new features? Well, in the past, the feature updates were controlled, right? Again, SharePoint 3-year release cycle. We were able to decide if we want to upgrade or not. We were able to decide what we wanted to turn on or not. And there usually was time for communication. And there was also there was time available for training, and we could take our time providing the training. But at the end, also IT departments, I think, were in a much better position to actually keep up with all the things that were coming, right? You heard about it ahead of time, you could read up on it, then the upgrade came, then you could reconsider what you wanted to do. So IT was really much, much more in control. And the business life was also slower. I mean, this fast pace that technology is now taking in its development, I think this also has a huge impact on the business. And I think in the past it was just a little bit slower. And I think all these new technologies really also force the business side to work faster. So when we now take a look at the present time in terms of all these great new features, well, again, the feature updates are almost constant. I always, when I do training and sessions with clients, I always tell the people, you know, if you go home on Friday and you come back on Monday and you turn Teams on and you notice there's a new feature, don't despair, maybe just ignore it for now, but then slowly get into it. But I think it's really hard. So there are no more rollout dates that are set in stone. I mean, it is constant. Do I keep saying that it's constant? I think must have something to do with the fact that I work with adoption and change. This is all change in my life. But IT has to keep up to date, right? Because it's like, how do we stay on top of it? It's not easy. It's really not easy. So at the end of the day, though, and this is something that I notice over and over again, is at the end of the day, people just want to get their work done. And Thomy, you and I have talked about this many, many times, but we just see that they really don't care about the tools, right? And why would they? I mean, they're not geeks, right? They have a regular job they need to get done.
Yeah, they don't care if it's oh, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but they don't care about this is Microsoft, this is G Suite, is it's Facebook for work.
Yeah.
They just want to get their work done, and they hassle-free, I think, is the right English proverb. No worries, easygoing, no problems, no error messages, no cryptic errors you had to Google or something like that.
Yeah. So, of course, we brought an approach for that as well. And the approach really is that as you start using Teams or have started using Teams within your company and rolling it out, we believe it's really, really important to designate an M365 owner in your IT department, maybe a Teams owner. I mean, there's so many different topics within the M365 world for which you kind of need an owner. But a person that really monitors the roadmap, that knows what's coming, knows ahead of time what features are coming, how they might impact what's already done, and what's very importantly already in use. And then you actually need to know what the business really needs, right? Because if I think about the app bar that you have in Teams, I mean, reality is you could pin a whole lot of different apps onto that app bar, which, hey, we as IT people, right, we say as tech people, oh, this is great, just give it all to them, this is wonderful. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, does each department really need all these things on that app bar? Because there is a lot of stuff. And even for me, sometimes I'm thinking, I mean, I'm really thinking hard about the things, which app do I need and which ones do I not need? And I've added apps and I removed them again. But it's really important to base those decisions on the needs of the business. And once again, to me, it is something that I have to remind myself on a regular basis. We do know as MVPs, we do know what's coming. We know what's coming down the pipeline. Thomy and I talk about these things and we get really, really excited about it. But at the end of the day, we always have to remind ourselves, well, we're kind of in a special group of people, right? And we just have to keep remembering that others might not necessarily share that excitement with us. And I don't know, Thomy, what do you think? I think it's okay that they don't share the excitement, right?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure I can accept that someone isn't really happy if you need PowerShell to set the setting somewhere.
Okay,
I
you had
know,
to say
but
that.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay.
Way too nerd. I know.
But nevertheless, at the end of the day, no, users are not crazy about all of the stuff. People just want to be successful. They want to get their job done, and this is something really important to keep in mind, because once we actually, I don't know, almost write it on a piece of paper, pin it somewhere on our desk or on our virtual desk, wherever we sit, and remember that, I think we're going to be able to do rollouts in a user-friendlier way. And I think in a way it also helps us maybe manage our reactions if some things are actually being accepted in a more excited way, also in a less excited way. And I think it's just fine that way. But we did bring another myth, right?
Of course, we have one more.
One more.
A classic one. We don't need to actually think about how we store something in Teams today. Used to be SharePoint a couple of years ago. We just use search. Search will solve all our problems. And that comes actually.
You mean it doesn't?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people that still believe that myth. And I can really relate to that, because in private life or in private use cases, most of the time, if you search something, you will find an answer in Google, Bing, or whatever search engine you use. In an environment where your subset of documents or subset of SharePoint sites, subset of something that is in your actual index is way smaller than the Google index, for example, you probably I probably can open up every Microsoft 365 search there is, and I can at least start typing 10 different search terms, and then there won't be an answer. But for that search term, there will be millions of hits in Google, for example. So I know I've been in that place myself. We go out and say, okay, just use it as the Google search and search for it. And people do that. But for search, there are two different things. If you think of a search use case, at one time, you actually 100% know the document you're searching for. You just forgot where it's stored. And you know that X sits between the project PowerPoint and our project report in Word, and I just want that one file, but I have no idea where it is. That rarely happens if you search on Google. You're just searching there and you're getting answers back from web pages from all over the world, but you're not really looking for that one single page. It might be the case if you already found something successful and want to go there back, of course, but most of the time you are open and just want new input. If you know already your stuff and you just want to go there, then your behavior change immediately and you have different expectations from the search engine. And the search engine can only be as good as you help it to be. It cannot do wonders, of course. So there is a shortcut to believe success somewhere there, and that's just not existing. What we are facing, not only with document search, but if you think a little bit broader, we are creating modern workplace environments where multiple systems are integrated together. And I still look for the one search to rule them all. I know that Microsoft creates an interface right now, and I've seen and worked with projects where we integrate different locations also in the Microsoft 365 search, but it needs to be done every time, and you need to connect every single system, and then you need to do something special if you want to connect to your on-premises CRM system, for example, just to give you one idea. So it's not really that easy. And again, everything is moving pretty fast around you, so you need to keep adopting there. It's more complex than it used to be with search, because there is more change around you, and there's also more change in terms of data. I think there's those studies that we produce more data every year, like a hockey stick graph, and more data and more data. And we are, sometimes we are already at a point where it's close to messy. It's cluttered. We have this clutter inboxes in Exchange, for example. So it's not so easy. And again, we have externals and guests as well. So if we create a real powerful and rich search interface, and then we invite someone over in Teams or in SharePoint, do we really want to expose our data to an external user, to a guest user as well? So we need to be careful what is reachable by search as well. So search shouldn't be like a way around permissions. That's not the idea of it. But there are some ideas how you can get things a little bit more structured without the need of filling out a huge pile of metadata. You can use folder default values. Feature is there since 2010, I think. It's in the library settings, default column values, and you can provide a default metadata for a certain folder. That leads a user to the experience of uploading a bunch of documents to that folder, and they get automatically metadata applied. Also, if they sync it through OneDrive, you just take your files, move them over to the one synced folder, syncs up, and the metadata is there. So that really helps. There are new approaches using AI for auto tagging, SharePoint syntax, for example, where you can define rules, and based on given training sets that AI also needs to train and to test. So you need to train the AI with certain aspects, and then the algorithms learn and apply what they learned, what their neural networks are saying, to a set input document. So if you have invoices, something like that, and you mark fields, it's pretty cool what you can already achieve with, I think I tried it with 5 different invoices from the petrol station, and since then my reporting comes in very handy each month, and someone is really happy at the office because I'm now managing to be in time with my reports there, so handing in invoices in that way. Again, create a governance process. It really helps with staying on top of it, and without a governance process, things can get messy way quicker. And then one important thing also, use information protection. Information protection, that's the feature set around the idea that you can prevent certain users to, let's say, print a document on a device that you don't want to be in your network. For example, I know we are still in this pandemic/COVID situation, but there will be a time where we are able to travel again. And for those use information protection examples, we always have this use case in mind where you might be on a beach in Greece, and there is this nice bar, and you just check on your emails for a couple of seconds. You open up the browser, type in your credentials, and in that very second, your child splits the Coke all over the table, and you're off. And you're going. And what happens with your open connection to your company portal back then that you just opened in that internet cafe? So do you really want to, or do you really want your users to be able to connect on an unmanaged device to sensitive data? There is no single rule to say all our data is sensitive. That makes no sense either. So it's a fine-grained system that needs to be adjusted, and small knobs to be in the right position to create the experience we all want to. So again, the myth is busted, of course, and a guided experience beats the strict process rules, of course. And then we have the last and maybe interesting
One
myth.
more we have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so after COVID-19, everything will be normal again, right?
Yeah, whatever normal means then, yeah.
I'm not sure. I think we're already in for a new normal, and there's going to be a new normal. But here's the thing. The rollout projects are still taking place. Maybe you have already rolled out teams or not, but nevertheless, continue to dream big and start small. Very, very important.
And then, of course, as we try to make you aware of, if you change the working environment, if you change the way the people work, those changes almost always create fears, not in everyone, but in certain people, and give courage to minimize fears and to be more empowered.
Absolutely. Then we have one more here to remind you of just be mindful. Be mindful of the world you move in, your work world also affects the private world. We never know what package other people are carrying, what challenges they're facing. And as we roll out something like Teams or technologies within M365, it's just important to realize that we're not all running at the same pace, but everybody is kind of coming from a different angle. And with that, we just have one more. This is one of my favorite. Even if you think that things are hard or something is not working well, just keep in mind that being patient is also an activity. This is something coming out of my adoption and change world, because oftentimes we want things to happen really, really fast, but the reality is that it takes time to adjust to new things. And I think the patience should start with ourselves. And once we recognize this for ourselves, that it's okay to take it slower, I think then it starts automatically extending to other people. What do you think, Tommy? What's your experience on that?
Yeah. Patience, of course. It's for me. It's more or I know that this is your one rule. I'm interpreting it with my rule of allowing people to learn and give them time to learn. And I interpreted or when I hear you saying about patience, it's for me the same, or the idea for me is that I need to be patient with customers or colleagues, keep up with everything that is happening and how they learn and how they learn their way around the system, and not being impatient and say, okay, did you understand it already? Can we move on? And so
yeah, that's a good point, because I think if we think about all these different myths that we brought along, I mean, let's just think about this for a second. The first one was it's just another IT project, right? Which is really not true. I mean, there's a lot of change behind this. Then we were talking about, well, we just use it as another file share. We're coming from an old world now moving into this new world. I had this topic of training is overrated. I mean, this is where we kind of recognize it's not really about training people anymore, but enabling them, right? And also just we copy what the other one does. To me is like, oh, if we do this, we save ourselves time and we just move fast and
we are being impatient. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think in the end, it all comes down to this idea that being patient is also an activity, and it's good to keep in the back of our mind. And we're almost, well, we're pretty much done here. We are at 43, so all we have left here is a heartfelt Dankeschön.
Danke.
From Austria and Germany.
Oh yeah, quick learner. Thank you for that.
Thanks for being patient.
Of course, always.
I learned my lesson. We don't have any messages here in the chat, and that's no problem. I hope we gave you great content and some impulses how to think about a Teams rollout. And with that, we would just like to say thank you. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. And if we understand it correctly, this content is going to be uploaded on the YouTube channel within the next 2 weeks.
2 weeks. And if you are watching on YouTube right now, if you have any questions, just look us up on Twitter, a short message, and we might not reply within hours, but we for sure will come back to you.
Yep. And now that you mentioned Twitter, I also just want to also add, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, connect with us. If you do connect with us, add a message that you saw us at the Scottish Summit so we can place it somewhere. But as you've already heard in our sessions, we also believe very much in extending and also managing your own network, because there's so many more great things coming in the M365 world, and the more people we know, the more we can learn from each other and make it a great experience for everyone.
And the more we can learn as well.
Yep.
By no way we know everything.
No, we don't. Thank God.
Yeah. Okay. With that, thanks again.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the Scottish Summit.